So, how do we quiet the mind during meditation? Well, as soon as you start meditating, the first thing that you'll notice is that the more you try to become quiet, the more you try to become still, the more the mind becomes active and the more the mind becomes loud and distracting, and all these different thoughts about the past and the future start to arise, and it just becomes very distracting and frustrating to stay in the meditation. And what a lot of people end up doing at this point is that they quit, they give up because they say it's too challenging. I can't get into that stillness. I can't experience that peace that surpasses all understanding because of my mind, because of all these thoughts. They're just too distracting, and I just can't do it. And they quit. And this was my experience early on. When I first started meditating, I was very frustrated because every time I would start meditating, I'd get maybe 5 to 10 minutes into it. My mind would just be such a barrier between what I was trying to experience, and that was that peace and that stillness and that state of no thought that so many of these spiritual teachers talk about. And I gave up, and I stopped trying to meditate for a while. But what I learned was that there were two things that I was believing about meditation that I think were preventing me from breaking through, preventing me from experiencing that stillness. And the first misconception that I believed was that meditation is about trying not to think. So, like during my meditation, I was trying not to think, and the more I tried not to think, the more challenging it became. And then I realized that it was pretty much impossible. Like, the more I focus and the more I try not to do something, the more I try not to think, it like it just try that. When you're in meditation, try not to think, and see what happens. It's pretty much impossible. The second thing was the second misconception was that I thought meditation was all about trying to control the mind and trying to control your thoughts. And so, same thing. The more I would try to control my thoughts, the more challenging it would be. And then the more frustrated I would get, because it was just really discouraging me. It was making me feel like, for whatever reason, I wasn't made to meditate. It just wasn't for me. And so, again, I just gave up on it, and I moved on to trying another spiritual practice. But once I got over these misconceptions, and I realized that meditation was simply about being aware, and it was simply about watching my thoughts and watching my feelings and watching my emotions, and letting them pass just like clouds pass in the sky, then there was some relief. And that was the beginning of me trying meditation again with this new approach. And then I learned a technique called the primary object technique, and this by far was the most helpful method or technique that I've tried, that I've experienced during meditation, that has allowed me to experience the most breakthrough and the most stillness and the most peace and the most benefit out of why we even meditate. And so the primary object technique is basically when you you focus on one thing, one object. And the whole point in doing this is that the mind has to be fixated on one thing, because if the mind is not, if the mind is just in this state of emptiness, or if it's just all over the place, then the mind's going to be tossed to and fro with every little thought and every little feeling and every little emotion, and the mind's going to be scattered. And that's what happens in the early stages of meditation, when we're dealing with all these different thoughts and we're distracted, because the mind has nothing to fixate on, so it's just all over the place. But if the mind is fixated on one thing during meditation, what happens is that all these other thoughts around that one primary object begin to fade away. You forget about them. You're not worried about them. You're not fixated on them, because you're focused on that one primary object. And eventually what happens is not only do all the thoughts around the primary object begin to fade away, but the primary object itself begins to fade away, and you drift into the stillness. You drift into that state of no thought. It's a lot like when you're trying to fall asleep at night. If you try to fall asleep at night, you're going to have a challenging time going to sleep. But if you just allow yourself to fall asleep, to drift into sleep, then it happens very effortlessly. It's something that's natural, and you just drift into it. And that's exactly what happens in meditation when we're experiencing these deeper states of meditation, where we do experience a state of no thought, where we do experience a state of peace that surpasses all understanding. The stillness draws you in. You can't get into the stillness. That's another misconception. People are trying to attain, and you can't do that. Meditation is not about getting, it's not about attaining, it's about letting go of all these things that are preventing us from drifting into the stillness that is always residing within the depths of our being. And so with the primary object, there's different objects we can use. There's the following your breath, which in recent videos I've talked about how following the breath has been one of my favorite primary objects to use. And I've experienced a lot of success with that in meditation. But about a month ago, I felt like it was time for me to do something different, to change it up, because I had been doing that for a little over a year. And just like anything in life, sometimes it's good to switch it up. Sometimes it's good to change. And so I changed my primary object from following my breath to the mantra. And when I made that change, and I started using the mantra meditation, I was amazed, because I started to experience more of that stillness, or it was taking me a shorter amount of time to get into the stillness with the mantra than it was with following the breath. So following the breath is great, but it can get boring. It can get monotonous after a while. And I understand, so can a mantra, but something about the mantra was different, because with the mantra, I'm saying something, I'm singing, I'm chanting, and there's something about that is just sacred. And so a mantra is a sentence or a few words that you just say over and over and over and over and over and over again. And these words are powerful. They have deep spiritual meaning, and there's many mantras you can find online. There's many mantras you can find in different books, and they're ancient, especially in Hinduism and Buddhism. But the whole point of the mantra is to get you. It's to bring you from the head space, the thinking mind, into the heart space where that stillness is. And the thing about a mantra is it can be enjoyable. It can be something that, I don't know, when you start saying some of these mantras, you start to feel a very sacred presence. And sometimes I'll get goosebumps, because something about it is just so sacred. And it is very spiritual, like I was saying. And doesn't necessarily have to be a mantra. It can be a hymn, it can be a chant. And so that's why there's so many like gospel hymns that are older hymns that we sing that have been around for centuries, that there's something about them that is very profound, very spiritual. And when we sing these hymns, we can sense this presence, we can sense this peace, we can sense this joy, and it really touches the depths of our being. And so you can use a hymn, you can use some kind of chant as a mantra in your meditation, and you just keep repeating it over and over and over again. And what happens is, as you get into it, you get lost in the mantra, you get lost in the chant, you get lost in the hymn. And that's the whole point. The whole point of these methods is to bring you into these deeper states of meditation, into the peace that surpasses all understanding. The mantra is the vehicle that takes you there. You can't get there on your own. And so what I'm going to start doing is, I've made a few guided meditations on my Patreon, and I've received a lot of positive feedback from those. So I will do some more of those in the future. But I think the next guided meditation I'm going to do is, I'm going to do a guided mantra meditation. And so basically, I'll start with a mantra. It's going to be something very simple but very powerful. And you can say it as I'm saying it, and then there'll be a time of where I stop saying it. There's a time of silence, and you can either remain silent during that time, or you can keep saying the mantra on your own, either out loud or in your head, and then I'll come back and I'll say it, and I'll just go back and forth. And I really think that that this is something that can help you if you've been practicing following your breath or different primary objects in meditation, and you feel like you just need something different. You feel like you just need something more. Again, that's kind of where I was. And when I started to really practice the meditation and learn about when I started to practice the mantra and I started to learn about the mantra, that's when I started to really break through that little plateau I was experiencing in my meditation, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the mantra. There's something about it that just refreshes the soul, and you get to a point in the meditation when you're saying the mantra where you feel like you could just sing this for eternity. It's a beautiful thing. So I'm excited about it. I will be posting it probably next week, and if it's good, I'll make some more if I receive positive feedback. But until then, you can find a mantra online. There's plenty of them, or you can just come up with one on your own. And it can be one sentence or two sentences. It can be really, really short. I think the important thing with the mantra or any primary object is you have to find what works best for you. You have to find what resonates with your soul the most, and that can look different for everyone. So you really need to find that for you, and then just begin to say it, begin to sing from your soul, and watch how the mind and the distractions and all the other things that try to take our attention during the meditation begin to fade away. We get lost in the song, we get lost in the harmony, and the next thing we know, we are experiencing the sacred stillness, the peace that surpasses all understanding, that is within the depths of our being. So I'm looking forward to it, and until then, try to practice a mantra on your own, and please let me know what your experience is like, and if it's something that works for you. So that's it, and I'll see you soon.